Today I want to show you one of my favorite importing tools for QuickBooks, the IIF Transaction Creator by Big Red Consulting. Now the reason I say this is one of my favorite importing tools is because of the way that it approaches importing. Unlike other tools, the IIF Transaction Creator doesn't actually feed transactions directly into QuickBooks. Instead, it creates an Intuit Interchange Format, or IIF file, that can then be imported into QuickBooks using tools that already exist within the software. The reason I like this approach so much is because I'm not feeding transactions directly into QuickBooks, the IIF Transaction Creator tends to run a lot faster than other tools that I've used. For example, recently I fed over 3,000 transactions into QuickBooks using the IIF Transaction Creator and was able to read them in within minutes, where with other tools it could have taken hours. Another reason that I really like the IIF Transaction Creator is because I'm not feeding transactions directly into QuickBooks, I don't have to be on the live file in order to create the importing process. Instead, I can create the IIF files remotely and then send them to an end user to be added into QuickBooks later. This provides a lot of flexibility and creativity when you're approaching an importing process. Now let's look at how the IIF Transaction Creator works. Like all of Big Red Consulting's tools, the IIF Transaction Creator functions natively inside of Excel. So in order to access the tool, you'll need to open up Excel. And once you have Excel open, if you go to the Add-ins tab, if you're using Excel 2007 or higher, you'll find the IIF Transaction Creator. Now there are a couple of different steps to actually using the IIF Transaction Creator. The first step is to make sure that your source document is in the correct format. To understand the format that the IIF Transaction Creator is looking for, you can look at the examples that are included with the tool. So we come down to the menu and click Examples, and you can see the different types of formats generally that are required for each of the different types of transactions. For today's example, we're going to use the multi-row format, and we're going to be importing some invoices. So I can click Show. It gives me a few warnings as it sets up my file for using the multi-row style. And then here are some examples of how the multi-row style needs to work for invoices in order for them to be fed in correctly. Some of the typical formatting you'll see with the IIF Transaction Creator is that the header line exists only on the first row of any transaction, and in column A, every new transaction begins with the word yes. This just helps the IIF Transaction Creator know where one transaction stops and a new transaction starts. You can also see some additional notes that have been included about some of the different fields and how they need to be formatted in order for your example to function properly. You'll notice let me get rid of this. You'll notice that in our example I've also included a new column called Class that wasn't included inside of our example. So anytime you have additional fields inside of QuickBooks that are recognized by the IIF Transaction Creator, even though they're not in the example, if you simply add them as a column with its proper header, then the IIF importer will pick up those fields without any additional mapping required. If for whatever reason the column that you've added is not recognized by the IIF importer, instead of the header being green when you run your check, which we'll see in a minute, the header will actually show up in yellow. Any columns that show up in yellow will not be imported back into QuickBooks. They won't throw an error, they won't prevent you from importing the rest of the data, simply that column will not be imported into QuickBooks. So I have my format already set up here, and we've used the examples to create this particular format. So the next step would be to verify the data that's in my source document to ensure that the data meets the requirements that QuickBooks has to create new transactions. So if I come up to the menu again and check Worksheet, the first part of verifying the information is actually bringing data from QuickBooks to verify against. So the IIF Transaction Creator is prompting me to pull lists, which means to pull in the data from your customers, your vendors, your chart of accounts, all these lists to check them against your source file to see if any new items need to be added. So this process typically only needs to be done the first time you're running a batch of transactions. Anytime there's additional changes to your QuickBooks file, you'll need to re-pull the lists. Typically speaking, I pull them once a day. So we'll pull those lists from QuickBooks. This takes just a second. And now it comes back and lets me know that it was successfully able to pull all of my lists from QuickBooks, and now we can continue to compare those lists against my source file. So I click Next and we begin the verification process. And you can see right away it's identified an error that we'll need to correct. The sum of the amount field for my first transaction, the one starting on row 2, doesn't balance. What this means is my debits and credits aren't equal. I can't create a QuickBooks transaction where my debits and credits don't equal. So I'm going to stop the checking process. We're going to go back and take a look at this, and sure enough, I'm $450 off. And it looks like I got dyslexic here, so we're going to change my amount to $940, and now my sum equals 0, my debits and credits are balanced, so I can go in and re-verify this particular source file. I don't need to pull lists again because I just barely did that and nothing's changed in QuickBooks since then. So we can skip that process, and now it comes back and lets me know there are no errors in my source file, but there are potentially some new names that I should be aware of. So we have a new customer and we have a new account. Now if we didn't intend to have that new account, then maybe I need to go back and check my spelling or something like that. But in this case, I intend to add that new account and that new name, something that the IIF transaction creator can do for us. So I'm just going to say OK. And at this point my check is complete. So now the third process is to go ahead and create the IIF file itself. So we can skip pulling the list. We just barely did that. And here, the IIF transaction creator recognizes that I've read these transactions in once before. I did that once when I was preparing for this presentation. So this is a way to help, that it tries to help prevent us from duplicating entry, which is possible with an IIF file. In this case, I know that these are not duplicate entries, although they may seem like it to the IIF transaction creator. So I'm going to say, yes, go ahead and create it anyway. So we'll go ahead and put this in my desktop, give it a name, tell it what kind of QuickBooks I'm using. We also have a few additional items we can choose from, like setting auto numbering if the numbering doesn't come across in your source file. In this case, I don't need to check any of those. So we are ready to go ahead and export to the IIF. It lets me know that we've successfully completed the export, and click OK. At this point, the IIF transaction creator is done. The IIF file has been created. Now I can take that IIF file, I can send it to someone, or I can import it myself into QuickBooks. In this case, we've got the QuickBooks file here in front of us already, so I'm going to go ahead and import that IIF file. So I can go to File, Utilities, Import, IIF Files. I can scroll down and find my IIF file, and there we are. The data has already been imported, and we're done. So as you can see, the process has several steps, but each step is relatively fast, and my experience has been that this tool runs a lot faster than most of the other tools I use, and provides a lot of flexibility in how I attack different importing problems or projects that I have. And for that reason, I feel like the IIF Transaction Creator by Big Red Consulting is an essential tool for any QuickBooks user or advisor's toolbox. If you'd like to learn more about how the IIF Transaction Creator works or how you can purchase it, you can contact your QuickBooks Pro advisors at Squire using the information provided below this video.